My name is Eric Ogle, and I am the CDBG Program Director with the Office of Community and Rural Affairs. Today, we will be going over the second phase of our COVID-19 response program and talking about how that process will work and all of the details related to it. So first off, I want to talk about the phase criteria. This criteria is very similar to our our first phase. So it is, available to non-entitlement local units of government that don't have any unresolved findings or overdue documents with OCRA. You will have to hold at least one public hearing prior to application, and then a second by closeout. And then we will have a maximum grant amount of $250,000 and a maximum of 2.5% of the request for grant administration. As with phase one, a certified grant administrator is optional for communities that choose not to use a grant administrator. However, as we saw with phase one, many of you did use a grant administrator, and you are welcome to use a grant administrator if you choose. So again, for this phase, the criteria very similar to phase one. You will note that I am calling, I'm starting to call them phases instead of immediate need or long-term need. Based on feedback and discussions with many of you, there seemed to be some confusion when we use that language about how these funds would flow and the responsiveness. And so we are moving to phases, and it's also easier as we believe we are going to have more than just two phases based on what we are seeing. So you will hear me using the language of phases instead of long-term or immediate need phase. So one other thing before we get too far, I do want to say we will have questions at the end. So please write those questions down and we will get to those at the end. So I want to talk a little bit before we get too far about the differences between phase two and phase one. So phase two is a competitive process. So we are going to have scoring criteria, and we will be doing a scoring, we will be scoring the applications and making awards based on that scoring. Where phase one was first come, first serve until we ran out of the funds that we had available. So that's the biggest difference. Also with phase two, we are going to be getting more information as part of the application. And this is going to help reduce the time for communities to access funds if they are awarded. So that is one thing that we saw with phase one, that there was some delays in getting funds to communities because we still had to collect a lot of information. So we are trying to collect all of that information up front with your application this time. To reduce that kind of back-end process. One thing that is very important to note on the differences is communities that received awards in phase one, you are still eligible to apply in phase two. Receiving an award in phase one does not exclude you from phase two. So you are still welcome to apply. For communities that applied in phase one and did not receive award, we have done a couple things to recognize that you did apply and you did put out that effort. So first off, you will be getting 10 points automatically as part of the scoring. and we'll go into the detailed scoring a little bit later. And then the other thing that we're going to be doing, we are going to move your application into phase 2 and reopen it. So the information that you provided to us in phase 1 will be there, and you will be able to access that and edit and revise that for your phase 2 application. So it makes that a little bit easier on those communities for that. For communities that were awarded in phase 1, your application has already been processed and approved, so you will have to start a new application. However, some of that information that you had in phase 1, you will be able to reuse in phase 2. So now I want to talk a little bit about the application process. This is another piece that's a little bit different from phase 1. So for phase 2, we're going to use a similar process that we use for our regular CDBG grants. And this is just to help everyone with consistency, and so you're not having to relearn what the process is. So today we are doing the introduction webinar, and so that's June 4th. The program is not open yet. It will open Monday on June 8th, and it will open around 9 a.m. on Monday. For communities that are choosing not to use a grant administrator, you will want to contact your community liaison to access the grant administration system. And we will, you will work with us to get you that access, and we will help you with getting things going within our grant management system. So then we will have proposals, and proposals are basically a draft application. You don't have to have all the details, you don't have to have everything clean and polished, but just enough so that we can provide you some guidance and some feedback on what you are proposing to do. So proposals are going to be due at 11:59 p.m. on June 21st. So at that time, OCRA and Grant Services will then review your proposals, and we will start providing you some technical assistance and looking at your proposals for threshold issues. For those of you that are newer to the process, our threshold review is our legal and regulatory check, where we basically determine, can we legally provide funds to this community based on the information provided. So we'll do that review and let you know of any issues that you would need to correct by application. Again, our hope is that by doing these reviews up front, we will avoid some of the issues that may limit or cause delays in communities accessing these funds. So between application and proposals and applications, our community liaisons and the CDBG team and our grant services team, all of us will be providing technical assistance to communities. So we'll be actively reaching out, we'll be responding to your emails and phone calls, and providing you that technical assistance to assist in making your application as competitive as possible. Applications will be due July 19th, again at 11:59 p.m. Once applications are due, OCRA and Grant Services will again do our threshold review and scoring. And then we are anticipating awards to be announced sometime in the week of August 9th. That is our target date. If we can announce early, we will. If we need a little extra time, it may be a week after. But that is our target date of the week of August 9th. Again, we understand the need for these funds in communities. And so we were trying to have an expedited process that also allows us to make sure everyone is in good standing and has everything that is needed to avoid any potential repayment of funds in the future. So we're doing things a little bit differently, but we know that this will help us a lot in the long run, and again, help us get those funds to communities as quickly as possible and avoid any of those repayment type situations. So for communities that are awarded, I do want to talk a little bit about the administration process, because this is something new for many people. So our administration process is made up of multiple steps, and this all occurs after you are awarded. So once you are awarded, our grant services team will send you a award letter. At that point, you can start working on your program and getting everything set up. However, you will want to make sure that you work with grant services and your community liaison to get all of the appropriate materials and these steps completed. So the first step is what we call our FEEPS check. And so this is a number of things that we have to check per HUD regulation before we can really move forward. So for the phase one, we did the grant agreement and FEEPS check at the same time. We did run into some issues with that, and so we are setting it where the grant agreement will occur after the FEEPS has been completed. So we are setting a tentative due date of August 28th. So that is based on when we announce awards and then also the responsiveness of communities. So depending on how that works, at the time with what we are proposing, we are wanting to get those FEEPS checks done by August 28th. For grant agreements, and that is where the chief elected official signs the actual grant agreement, that we want and are expecting to get that done by September 4th. In many cases, communities that respond very quickly to get those grant agreements, we can get those back and turned around sometimes in as quickly as 24 hours. But again, it depends on the responsiveness of the chief elected official and a number of different things. But we anticipate being able to get all of those completed around the 4th. At this point, you as communities would have started your local application solicitation process. So we imagine that would occur, after you complete FEEPS, but before grant agreement, and then prior to September 18th is when you. So again, once you receive your award letter, you would be able to start that solicitation process if you choose to move forward at your own risk with that. So the next step would be our review, Okra's review of the proposed business awards from the communities. So once you're done with your solicitation process, then you provide us that list of your proposed awards. And so we would, again, tentatively like those by September 18th. If you get those to us in sooner, we'll review them sooner, but that's kind of the date we would like them by. And with that, then we would be able to complete release of funds by the 25th, and release of funds is where we, do the official sign off and open up those funds for you to claim. Your claims then would be due fairly quickly after that, around October 2nd. And then your monitoring and closeout, we would like to have all of these closed out and monitored somewhere around February of 2021, which would also include the second public hearing that you are required to do. and that is per HUD regulation. So there is going to be annual reporting requirements with this. So for loans, the requirements go on into perpetuity until the funds are converted into grants. And then for grants, it's 2 years after closeout is the reporting time period. So loans definitely have a longer reporting time period than grants, but that is something that you will work with OCRA on completing. So that's kind of the administration process. Again, those dates are tentative, and just to give you some idea of how we are trying to expedite this process. In many cases, depending on a lot of different factors, these dates could be sooner, they could be later, just depends on each individual community that is awarded funds. So now let's talk about eligible activities. This is also one difference between phase 1 and phase 2. For eligible activities, we are only focusing on economic recovery activities of either loans or grants. So first I want to talk about the eligible business recipients. This is something that we got a lot of questions about in phase 1. And so for phase 2, we want to define it a little bit better to help communities have some focus and a little bit structure around that. So for eligible business recipients, they must be for-profit enterprises. So our funds cannot go to nonprofits for this program or for this phase. And they have to either be small businesses, and we are defining that as 100 employees or less, or micro enterprises, which are 5 employees or less, where one of them is the business owner. And we have those two definitions because the two types of businesses are treated a little bit differently when we look at the national objective of job retention. The eligible business recipients also must be able to meet the national objective of 51% LMI job retention, and they can do that in 2 different ways. The first way is income verification and using OCRA's full-time equivalency worksheet. That is something that we created in phase 1 and we'll be asking everyone to use for phase 2. Or if it is a micro enterprise, so this only applies for micro enterprises. If we can document that the owners of the micro enterprise are LMI, so if there's one owner and they are LMI, or if there's 2 owners and they are both LMI, then we can classify that business as LMI as a micro enterprise, and still they will be eligible for funding. So those are the 2 primary pieces for eligibility for the business recipients. Additionally, as with phase 1, they also must be able to document that the jobs being retained be lost if not for the grant or loan funds. So they have to be able to say, if it weren't for these funds, I would have to eliminate these jobs, or I would have to go out of business type statements. So next I want to talk about some details about the eligible activities of loans and grants. This is specific for loans to businesses. As I said, the national objective will be low to moderate income job retention, and they will have to demonstrate that the jobs would be lost if not for CDBG assistance. The activities that they can use this for, this is something that we got a lot of questions with phase 1. It's working capital, it's general working capital. So this could be used for cover rent, it could be used to cover utilities, used to get supplies, anything like that, or support remote work or things like that. The only real limitation is that if they received other federal funds for a specific item, such as the PPP program through the Small Business Administration, they can't use our funds for that same thing. So, if they get that type of other assistance, then they would focus our funds elsewhere. So they can still get both, they just have to make sure the funds are not overlapping in what they are paying for. Additionally, for loans, we are providing a little bit additional requirements to help, again, communities provide that structure. We have a lot of discussions with communities about, well, what are my terms going to be? What are my criteria? Things like that as part of phase one. So we're going to provide just a little bit more structure. But as you will see with this structure, there's still a lot of flexibility. So loans can be up to $25,000 per business. The term of the loan and period of the loan can be 3 to 5 years. Communities for phase two can charge up to 2% interest if they choose. And they can also choose to charge up to a 1% loan administration fee. So the interest, that gets added to the payments, where the loan administration fee gets added on top of the loan amount. So if you loan a business $25,000, then you can charge a fee of $250,000. So their actual loan amount would be $25,250 if you do the loan administration fee. We are, you can use different structures of payments. You can go with the standard and traditional monthly payment. You can do quarterly payments, or you could even do annual payments. We leave that kind of up to you. You also can choose to have the balance of the loan converted to a grant if the business has retained the jobs for at least 2 years. So with this, if a business, receives a loan, and in 2 years' time, you go back and you're doing your with the annual reporting, and that business has retained those jobs, then you could say, okay, we're going to convert the remaining balance of the loan into a grant. And so they don't have to pay it back, and they are done, kind of that ends that relationship and ends that loan. And there's a number of different ways that we would look at the job retention, and it would be at that 2-year period. So let's say maybe a business gets a grant or gets a loan, and in a year from now, they've had to let go of one of the jobs. So they weren't able to retain the number of jobs that they thought. But when we go back on that second year, they actually added 2 jobs, and so they ended up having 1 more job than what they originally had. Then that's where they would have actually retained those jobs. So it's retained or grew the number of jobs. And again, this is something that you as a community can choose to do if you want to. You can also choose to defer payments for up to the first 6 months. If you do choose to defer payments for 6 months, that you do have to, you are not able to charge interest for that 6-month period. So that 6-month period would be a 0% interest. But then after that 6-month period, if you choose to charge an interest rate, that would be that up to 2%. And again, because this is a loan with the way federal regulations are, you are going to be providing annual reporting as the community to us, basically as long as you are still making loans with the funds. Now, if you convert the loans into grants, then we reduce the amount that is considered loan funds. And so we only look at those funds annually that are still loan funds. And we look at those until they're put into grant funds. So that could be forever. So now I want to talk about grants. Grants are a little bit more simple compared to loans. Same national objectives, same type of activities. The requirements, though, up to $10,000 per business, and then there are 2 years of annual reporting after closeout. So with grants, you only have 2 years of reporting, but there's a little bit lower cap on what businesses can receive as far as grant awards. So that is the eligible activity element. And now I want to talk about the scoring criteria. As I mentioned, this round this phase is going to be competitive. And so we've created scoring criteria that looks at how a community is impacted by COVID and looks at a number of factors that have been shown to relate to the level that a community is impacted by COVID-19. So first off, I just want to review some of the scoring, kind of an overview of the scoring criteria. There are a total of 400 points possible. There is a minimum score of 175 points to be considered for funding. So your application has to score a minimum of 175 points for us to consider it for funding. Scores are a mixture of database and scoring committee factors, and we're going to go over those in details. For the factors that are based on data, we are using all publicly available data, so this is not information that we are pulling from internal sources or that we ourselves are commissioning or anything like that. This is all information that is publicly available, and we are getting it from a variety of different sources, from census data to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and also DWD with unemployment claims. So all publicly available that anyone can access. For the scoring committee factors, as with our normal programs, they will be scored by a committee and based on consensus. And when we say consensus, we mean that all 3 members of the committee must agree on the score. It's not done by average or anything like that. So the individuals that make up that committee are a program manager from OCRA, one of our program specialists from Grant Services, and then an OCRA community liaison that does not represent a community being scored. So basically, your CL that represents your community cannot sit on your scoring committee, on the committee that is scoring your application. And we do that to eliminate any conflicts of interest or biases or anything like that. And again, we do that. That is a normal process for scoring committees that we have. So now let's talk about some of the data-based factors that we will be using. So the first thing that we'll be looking at in determining scoring is community data. So again, this is that publicly available data. Most of this comes from the census or the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So first off, we will be looking at a community's LMI percentage, and we'll be using the HUD LMI data that is updated annually. That is a total of 60 points possible there. With that, it's a very straightforward. If your LMI percentage is 52.48, you get 52.48 points. So very straightforward. For educational attainment, there's a total of 10 points possible, and we are looking at the percent of 25 and over individuals that has some college or less. So the higher percentage of individuals that are 25 or older that have some college or less for education, the higher your percentage, and so the more points you get. And this is on a sliding scale. And we will be publishing an update to that scale tomorrow when we publish our final the finalized MOD from from last week's public hearing. Per capita market income. This is another one where we are looking at the percent or the per capita market income as a percentage to the state's per capita market income. I will note that this is different from the per capita income. Per capita market income does not include transfer payments. So it's a more accurate reflection of income. And again, that is as it is compared to the state per capita market income. And again, this is a sliding scale, and we will be releasing the final scale with the final MOD tomorrow morning. Labor force participation. This, again, we are looking at the labor force participation as compared to the state level labor force participation, and this, again, is a sliding scale with a total of 10 points. So all of these, one question that we've gotten a lot of is, why are we looking at data from sources that the data has changed since COVID? And so the reason we are looking at this data is research has shown that these pieces of data were indicators of how COVID and how much impact COVID would have on a community. So for educational attainment, for example, the higher level and percentage a community has of individuals with some college or less, the greater impact COVID had on that community. So again, as we are looking at these indicators, we are looking at them in a way of this data is correlated to the impact that COVID had on a community, and it is an indicator that COVID had a greater impact on a community if this indicator is at a specific level. So that's what we are looking at with those indicators. So, for example, a community's LMI percentage, data showed that the higher an LMI percentage, the more a community was impacted by COVID-19. And so that's why we are trying to look at that, and that's why we are including these data points. And the way we are looking at them is to gauge that impact based on research and what has been shown based on research a number of universities and health researchers have done. So that is the community data. Now, the next data point that we're going to look at is much more specific and is based on the weekly continued unemployment claims. This is at the county level. This data we are getting from DWD, and it will be based on the data available at time of application. So on that due date for the application, we will look at the data on that for that week, and that is the data we will use for this. So it will be very timely, very current, and based on the current situation you as communities are receiving. And as you see, that is worth up to a maximum of 50 points. This is a sliding scale, and this scale, again, we will be publishing with the updated MOD. We will also be providing all of these scales and all of this detail on our website and when we announce and release all of the resources for the opening of this program on Monday, the 8th. Next, we have the status of an existing revolving loan fund or grant program. And so this is a total of 10 points. And basically, we're looking at two things. If you have a current program, either a loan program or a grant program, have you obligated or expended all of your funds? If you have, you get 5 points. And is there a waiting list? And so if you have a waiting list, then you get 5 points with that. And you are, able to use our funds to refund those existing programs as long as the programs meet all our criteria that we outlined before. The next set of data-based factors is, first starts out with local match. Local match is still not required for this program. However, we wanted to recognize that some communities have chosen to use their own funds to match the funds we provided. So this is based on your percentage. Your local match is for the total. And so it's 20 points maximum. So if you have a 20% local match, then you would get 20 points. The next is, does your program support or focus on minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses? And so if your program has special scoring criteria, or there is a tier system with how you're distributing funds, there's a lot of different ways in which we will, consider supporting minority, women, or veteran-owned businesses. And so we'll just be looking, does your program take that into consideration when you are making awards? And if it does, you will get 10 points. And for those that are interested in minority, we use the state definition, and that also does use the federal definition, which includes really any individual that can show that they are disadvantaged due to a number of reasons. That could be that they are disabled individuals, or just a lot of different things. So if you have a question about what is eligible under this one, please don't hesitate to reach out. The next database factor is collaboration with your local Main Street organization. We saw this a lot with phase 1, and so we want to recognize the communities that are doing this. Your Main Street organizations actively work with your local businesses, so this seems like a normal, natural collaboration for this type of program. And so if you collaborate with your Main Street organization, you will get 5 points. We're also going to award 10 points for regional collaboration. In phase 1, we had several counties that worked with a number of their towns or cities to establish a program, and so that is, that collaboration. So again, this is something we will look at in a lot of different manners, but it is that you are working together to provide these grants or loans to a region. So you must be working together. So then finally, participation in our hometown business prevention initiative. That program, the official close of that official applications for that program were due back in May. However, if you are still interested in being involved in this program, reach out to your community liaison and talk to them about how you can potentially be involved in this program and participate in that program. So that is all of the data-based factors. Now let's talk about the scoring committee factors. So the scoring committee factors, much like we always do, is going to be looking at your narratives and your documentation based on questions. So we will be providing the official scoring questions as we normally do to those communities that submit a proposal. So after that proposal due date, we will send everyone the official scoring questions and provide technical assistance to them based on those questions. So in general, though, here are what we are going to be looking at in these sections. So for program description, which we normally call project description, is a total of 50 points, and we'll be looking at your application and your selection process, the terms of your grants and loans. So, what are you going to require them to do? What are the repayment terms, things like that. Your selection criteria. So how are you deciding what businesses will receive awards from your program? And then your program history. Is this a program that has existed for a while? How has it been run? What has gone on with it? Is this a new program? Now, one thing I want to know, we are not going to, say, oh, new, programs that have existed a long time are, get more points than new programs. No, we are going to look at, what is going on? What's the history of it? How long has things been, have you been discussing this? That more of that kind of tell us what's going on with this program and your comfort level and your confidence with what you are doing with this program. So then in program need, normally we call this project need, a total of 70 points. Impact, and we're going to be looking at two things. Impact of COVID-19 on the community, its residents, and the local businesses. So we want the holistic view of how your community has been impacted, not just how your businesses have been impacted. We also want to look at, if you receive these funds, how would that impact your community? So you're going to tell us basically two things: how COVID-19 has impacted your community, your residents and businesses, and then if you get these funds, this is how your community, residents, and local businesses are going to be impacted. Next, we'll look at program management. Normally, we call this financial impact. It is a maximum of 70 points. And in this, we'll look at your selection committee, so the makeup of your selection committee. We don't need specific individuals. We're more looking at what types of backgrounds are going to be on your committee. Details on how you're going to manage the program. Is this program going to be managed through your economic development corp, your regional planning organization, your Main Street organization? What things are going to be put in place to manage them? And so that goes to the financial management and stability. How are you going to ensure stability of the management? So this is especially true with loans. If you're doing a 5-year term for loans, how are you going to ensure that the management of those loans and that reporting is going to be there for that term and longer? And then the big thing is going to be, we are asking you to submit draft program materials. And two items that we are requiring is the draft application and your strategic marketing plan. So how are you going to be marketing your program to your local businesses? Those are the two pieces of materials that are required. You're going to have many others, and if you want to include those, we encourage you to include them. And then lastly, community input from residents, and this is going to be worth 10 points. And this is something that you would include and is going to be heavily related to your program needs section. And this is going to be that documentation that supports all of those statements that you make about how your community is being impacted and why you need this program. So this could include, and these are just examples, comments at your first public hearing, survey results, social media posts, or letters of support. These are all things that we commonly see with that. On the public hearings, this kind of goes without saying, but we are still accepting virtual public hearings. That is not going to change until we get word from the public access counselor that he is no longer allowing that as an option. But as long as that is still an option, we will accept the virtual public hearing. So I'm now going to open it up for questions. And so to ask a question, we ask that you use the raise hand function in the same manner that we do public hearings. To access that raise hand function, you will find it at the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and you just click on that. Before we start getting into the questions, I do also want to let you know that you can also reach out to your community liaison with questions. If they have any questions, they will reach out to myself or the rest of the CDBG team. But they are your community liaisons, and they are going to be your primary point of contact for this phase of the program. So I believe the first raised hand I saw was Debbie Bennett, and so we will unmute you here. And you are unmuted.
Okay, Eric, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. First of all, I'm getting feedback. Thank you for the changes that you made in listening to the communities. I know several of them had written letters, so we appreciate that. And I have 4 questions. 2 of them kind of go down the same path. First of all, can GA still be procured through small purchase methods?
It's the regular procurement methods that we've always allowed.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the the grant administrators were allowed to be through small purchases, and I didn't know if we were going to have to go through the full advertisement procurement or not.
So it's the same way we've always done it. So whatever was allowed last time is the way that this time will be allowed to.
Okay. How do communities know if they had a grant administrator or not? Is that just by contacting their liaison?
So that's up to them to determine if they want a grant administrator or not. So that's a community level decision.
No, I meant how did the communities find out if they did use one the last time or not?
Most of our communities, I think, would know who they used for phase 1. If there is a question about that, then they can reach out to their community liaison.
Okay.
But yeah, I would hope that they know who their grant administrator was for phase 1.
Okay. You did say you were going to provide the sliding scale when you put the final up. And
Yep.
But I want to make sure, are you going to provide the links to the data information so we can check for the communities pre-score whenever they are starting their applications on the data scoring?
We can provide what the source is. In some cases, we can't provide a link because they are active tables. For example, if the census, you can't provide a direct link. You have to go in and edit the data down, but we can tell you what table we're going to be using.
Okay. And last is, if you don't have an existing grant or loan program, then that 10 points just is not available. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I've got.
And then next, Matt.
Matt Worth.
Yes,
Matt Worth.
Yes.
Thank you. My question is, can the city put any type of restrictions on the grant program itself above and beyond what OKRA does? In other words, could we prohibit applicants that received any of the SBA funds from receiving these funds, if that's a policy we chose to make here locally?
Yes, you can always make things more restrictive if you choose to do that. We had a couple communities in phase 1 do that. And the example you used, I think one of them did that. They said, hey, if you're getting funds from SBA, you're not going to be eligible. We had another one that added a restriction that if the business moved out of the community, within a year they would have to repay the grant. And
Yes.
so, yeah, so you can do that. That's up to you.
And no penalty if we do that in terms of scoring, if we chose to do that.
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
We would look at, that's part of your selection criteria, and we would just look to make sure that, you understood what that meant and kind of, why are you doing that? So, it's kind of the same thing of, we never tell a community what to do or anything like that. We just want to understand your thought process behind it.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then, Pond?
Hello?
Hi, yes, you're unmuted. Yes.
So, in phase 1, stellar communities can apply. Can they still apply for phase 2?
Yes, that is still the same.
Okay, that's what I wanted to check. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And Mary? You're unmuted. Oh, Mary, are you there? You may have to unmute on your end.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you are.
Okay, sorry about that. We were wondering, is there any way that you could, or the questions that are going to be asked could be supplied prior to the proposal for communities to start working on instead of waiting until after the proposal's due? Is that possible?
So we were kind of following the process we normally use, which is to provide that proposal. If that is something that would help communities in writing their proposal, I think we could do that. Let me talk with Matt and the staff and see how we think about that, and if we can do that, we will do that.
Yeah, I think for a lot of communities, it's new, it's a new program, and they're really not going to know what, exactly to work on, and maybe just give them a little more time to get the project developed. So it would be beneficial, I think, to you and the communities.
Yeah, no, we can definitely look at that. I just want to make sure there's, not a reason why we can't do that. So, but yeah, we'll definitely look at it, and we will.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And we have another hand, Dean. And Dean, you're unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just got a question. These funds are available for grants and loans.
Mm-hmm.
Grants nice, you just give the business the money and they don't have to repay it. If we set up loans where people are repaying the money, the funds we receive from those payments, can that be put back into the program and recycled into other loans or other grants? I'm not sure how that.
Yeah, so if you do the loans, one of the kind of benefits of those is as those funds are repaid, then you would revolve those funds and make new loans with those funds.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Like a revolving loan fund.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And then it looks like Rick, you just raised your hand, and Rick, you're unmuted.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, as you get those grant funds back, what are the loan funds back? What are the criteria for then loaning those back out? Once we get on the other side of COVID, can communities set their own criteria for that?
So yes and no. So the funds are always going to have the federal regulations tied to them. So you're always going to have to focus on the LMI job retention piece. But let's say instead of looking at how businesses are being impacted by COVID, you want to look at, some other element, you would just reach out to us and we would work with you to make amendments to your program to make sure we're still meeting the federal regulations.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And then Lori. Lori, you're unmuted. Oh, wait, it looks like Lori just got muted again. There you go. You are, yeah.
I wanted to ask about the interest that you're able to charge in this round versus phase one.
Yep.
Are we going to have to report that as program income? How is that going to work?
Yeah, so any funds you receive as part of the loans, that is program income, and that's why there's that annual reporting for as long as the funds are being loaned. So when you report that as program income to us, then we basically say we've given that back to you, and then you loan that out again.
Is it possible for a community that was awarded in phase one to go back and kind of adapt to follow a little bit more of this model that is available in phase two? And maybe that's more of an individual talk to Andrea or Abigail question.
Yeah, the two have very different kind of focuses. So, I think that is something that we could talk about. But my first reaction is you may not be interested in doing that, but we can definitely talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. And then we have Noble County EDC. You're unmuted.
Thank you. Good morning. Our question is, if we have a grant recipient from round one funding that we secured,
Yes.
Are they eligible to receive funding in round two?
Yes, they are still eligible. They would be able to apply and be considered for funding.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any more hands, and we are at the end of our time. So I just want to thank you all very much for attending. I hope this was informative. Again, look for more information being announced Monday morning with all of the details of the program and everything like that and where you can go for that. So look forward to working with you all on this, and you all have a great rest of your week.